There we go. Nice little fella. You know, I think food gardening is like anything else in life. You make mistakes and you learn from them. G'day, I'm Mark from Self Sufficient Me, and in this video, I'm going to give you 5 mistakes that I made when I first started our food garden, so that you, especially if you're a food gardener, don't make them too. Actually, I think I picked this a little bit too early. Let's get into it. Unfortunately, you just can't put a chilli back on a chilli bush to ripen it further. But fortunately, chilies can be eaten at all different times. So at least I can still find a use for it. But I make mistakes all the time, and this isn't one of the mistakes that I want to talk about. Number 1 is big square raised garden beds. Not these, but when I put in our first raised garden beds back in 2006, I just wanted to make some garden beds as quick as possible and get into growing our veggies. So you know the acronym KISS, Keep It Simple Stupid? Well, that can be applied to a lot of things in life, and rightly so. But sometimes, and rarely maybe, things can be a little too simple. And my first raised garden bed design of big square sleepers was a perfect example of a simpleton at work. I thought that making a simple square raised garden bed out of our wooden sleepers was a great idea. No cutting to size, just make a square, nail them together and fill them with dirt. And initially that worked until I started growing things in it. And then I quickly realized what a mistake that I had made. The fact was, I couldn't use the whole raised garden bed anyway. Even though I had that big space, much of it in the center was unusable because I couldn't reach in there. Initially, I would get planks or I'd walk into the garden bed or kneel in or lean over. But what happens is that compresses the soil, and it's not great for growing veggies in compressed, compacted soil. I decided that I would maybe put some pot plants in the center of the bed, and I would brick or pave the center bits to try to keep the weeds down, because I found that garden maintenance is always ongoing in the veggie garden, and if you can't reach the center of the bed, that would get full of weeds. So I thought if I paved or bricked that would solve the problem. Of course it didn't. I just had grass and weeds grow in the middle of the bed where I couldn't reach. So in the end, I decided that I would have to cut a keyhole, and I guess it was experience and research that eventually led me to know I needed to alter the beds so I could get better access, and a simple keyhole cut worked a treat. Of course, those beds now are long gone because they all rotted out, and I've replaced them with this row of rectangular beds. And you know why? Because they might be just as long as those big square beds, but for example, when you're weeding, and I've got plenty of weeds in this bed here, I can almost reach the other side of the bed. Hardly any bending, weed out what I want to do, and no problems. Mistake number 2 is right structure for the right crop. When I salvaged some spare posts from our kids' play gym build to grow passion fruit, I thought I was being clever and resourceful. But now this monstrosity of a dragon fruit trellis reminds me every day of why I'm not a carpenter, because I'd be broke. The problem with this trellis is it's too high to begin with. And although that's good, it allows the plant to get plenty of sun. It also has made the structure lean to one side. And I don't mean like in an artistic type of way, say like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The leaning trellis of dragon fruit, is just a pain to try to keep propping up. But even though the vine itself is growing well and producing good fruit, it's going to have to be replaced. And that's because I didn't build it properly in the first place. I now know I should be building something like a 6 to maybe 8 foot post and having a really good strong footing so that heavy dragon fruit cactus vine doesn't pull it over. And you can apply this principle to any food crop that requires trellising or a structure to grow on. pick the right structure, the appropriate structure. Like tomatoes, you might have a cage for them, it might need them to be too big. Grapes, you do need a fairly good strong structure as it grows. Gourds, for example, I've got a gourd tunnel and that works really well, even though the kookaburras are trying to laugh and say it isn't. They always laugh at me when I talk about my gourd tunnel. That's probably because they love it so much. At the end of the day, an appropriate structure, or even a little bit more over-engineered, is always a good way to go when you're trying to support a food crop. The third mistake is drainage around the vegetable garden. When I'm working in the garden or if I'm harvesting veggies, I don't want to feel like I'm walking the Kokoda track back in World War II. And when I first built this veggie garden, that's exactly what it felt like, especially through the rainy season here in our subtropical climate. So I thought I would kill two birds with a whole heap of stones. I put a lot of drainage gravel in. I used it for mulch to keep the grass down because I thought that would save me time. And the other thing it gave was, of course, drainage underfoot. It worked for a period of time until the grass and the weeds started to grow through all those rocks, and then I realised that wasn't working and the maintenance was ridiculous. So what I did was added some dirt on top of that drainage rock, and then I grassed the whole area. It's nicer underfoot, you don't get rocks everywhere, and the drainage is superb. No matter how hard it's raining or has rained, it's not sloshy around our garden beds now. The fourth mistake is not understanding that different fruit trees have different needs. When I first started here, I was keener than a dog with a ball. So I pretty much bunged everything in the ground the same way without realising some fruit trees have different needs. A really good example of this is planting the wrong fruit trees in clay soil. Here you can see how fantastic it's growing, isn't it? But just around that row, the second row in, I had some avocado trees. And those avos grew okay for the first 12 months or so, and I thought it was a champ. I mean, the climate is perfect for avocado trees. But what I didn't realise, because I hadn't had the knowledge back then, and I didn't do enough research, was that avocados are very susceptible to root rot, particularly in clay soil. And under about a foot of topsoil here, we have got awful clay soil, and the avocados pretty soon reached that, and then they started to die on me. So then I tried growing avocados in pots because I thought that might fix the problem, but again, that proved to be unsuccessful. So what I did was I started growing avocado trees on mounds way high above the clay. I started with one avocado as a trial, and now it's growing very well. And now I've got several avocado trees growing using the same method, high mounds. And you can see these are about waist height. I've mounded the soil up. They are growing really well. Even one, which is barely 12 months old, it's starting to produce fruit, and we've got 1, 2, 3, at least 4 avocados there for harvesting in about another month or so. I've actually let the weeds and the grass grow into this mound because I want them to act as a bit of a mulch, but also it's going to hold the soil here in place so that it doesn't come down the hill here. I've got a barrier to try to stop any erosion, keeping that mound high so that that taproot doesn't end up touching the clay. Now there are some trees, like thankfully citrus, that don't worry about clay soil much at all. They grow fantastic here without hardly any care. But this method, or mounding up, or just understanding what is best and what the best area and planting zone or how to plant for each different fruit tree you do plant, is a really good idea. So do a little bit of research, unlike what I did when I first planted avocados, and understand that better so you don't make the same mistake that I made. And the fifth mistake I want to talk about is a little bit contentious, and that's growing in ground. Now I know that it's a cheap and easy way to start veggie gardening, especially for beginners. And I'd encourage you to do that, especially if you're young. But me, being over 50 and having several injuries and just getting older, sometimes my body is stiffer than a turtle's neck in the snow or in the rain, because now it's starting to fall just towards the end of this video. I thought I could escape it, but I couldn't escape the pain that I was in trying to grow in furrows, and that's why I gave it away. I didn't know this at the beginning, but tilling the ground over and over isn't very good for the soil, and I understand that now. I mean, you have to dig occasionally in a garden bed, no matter what you've got, to plant things and to remove weeds and whatever, and to harvest even, say, potatoes. But limiting the amount you till, it helps the microbes, the fungi and the worms and other animals survive better in your soil because they're not getting disturbed as much. So I said goodbye to tilled soil and growing in furrows, and hello to raised garden beds, and in particular these Birdies raised garden beds, because they last forever and I just love them. It's got plenty of different shapes and sizes, and yes, as you know, I am affiliated with Birdies garden beds, not only in Australia here in New Zealand, but also over in the good old USA with Kevin from Epic Gardening. So if you want any of these types of raised alu zinc garden beds, which I recommend, see the description below. It'll have links to those shops and also a way that you can save yourself 5% on a purchase. But whatever, for me personally, even if you don't use a Birdies raised garden bed, for example, build your own, that's fine. Raised garden bed gardening is definitely the way to go. And I've got some more raised garden beds that I've just purchased that I'm going to put down the back there and fill in even more space where I used to have those furrows just in front of those banana trees. I hope you enjoyed this video on the mistakes, or some of the mistakes that I've made. If you did, don't make the mistake of not giving this video a big thumbs up and share the video around. Also subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now. Whew, I tell you what, trying to film in this rain and this humidity, whew, I reckon that was a mistake. If you think it wasn't, write your comments down below. Cheers.